Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon to all of you. Pleasure to host you all today. This is Cynthia from Ramco Systems, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar on Re-imagining Payroll in a Digital-First World. We have over 600 registrations for the webinar from all around the world, mostly HR and technology practitioners from several industries. Firstly, would like to thank you all for the interest and your time today. Before we start off with the webinar, here are a few housekeeping items. Please keep your microphones on the mute mode to avoid any disruptions. During the webinar, if your audio should stop or stutter, just restart your GoToWebEx platform. You can type in your questions on the chat window during the webinar, and we will answer the same at the 15 minutes live Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Moving to the subject of today's webinar. While organizations' use of globally distributed talent pools, both temporary and permanent, has become a commonplace and nearly seamless, payroll functions have not kept pace with the times. Inhibitions to working across geographies have fallen, but still they remain for payroll. Why is that? Today in this webinar, Ramco, along with featured experts from Everest Group and PORR Construction, will share views on reimagining payroll in a digital-first world. With that background, I'm happy to introduce the speakers. Anil Vijayan is a leader in Everest Group's Global Business Process Research Program with a focus on HR and talent services. He drives the HR research and advisory program covering areas such as multi-process HR outsourcing, payroll outsourcing, benefits administration outsourcing, and HR technology. Tamar Amar is a seasoned strategy drive global HR executive with 22 years of experience in senior leadership roles across the engineering and construction industry and covering many geographical regions including USA, Middle East, and Europe. He has an excellent track record of identifying and mitigating potential human capital risks and developing or implementing cross-functional solutions to maximize value realization for the organization. Balamalai Alais Bala heads the Global Payroll Advisory Services, responsible for managing and consulting customers across regions, starting from business case articulation to process harmonization, best operational practices, and ecosystem integrations. Experienced professional with a demonstrated history of successful global implementations, bringing transformation through practical innovation and automation. Okay, given that we've done with the introduction of the speakers and the agenda, get up for an insightful session, all of you. Over to you, Anil.
Thank you, Cynthia. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to be part of this webinar, and we have an interesting topic today. So we're going to talk about payroll and how things are changing in the world of payroll. We'll first speak about the current state of payroll, followed by what the future state could look like, what best practices enterprises should adopt as they seek to get there, and finally we'll leave some time for Q&A. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the challenges which plague payroll today. So this list is by no means exhaustive, but it consists of some of the more frequent challenges that we encounter. So first, I'm sure as all practitioners on the call would agree that the frequently changing regulatory landscape and associated compliance is a big pain point. Second, and this is particularly true if you're a geographically distributed organization or a conglomerate, there's a strong likelihood that you would have multiple systems for HCM and payroll in different countries or across different business units. Now this of course creates challenges in terms of integration, visibility, reporting, standardization, and so on and so forth. Additionally, having multiple systems means having to pull data from multiple sources even for a single pay run, and consequently you'll have to deal with more validation, more errors, leading to a longer payroll cycle. So this forms a nice segue into the next challenge, which is essentially around payroll accuracy and everything required to get it right. So payroll accuracy continues to be a formidable challenge today. Getting it right the first time a pay run is attempted is still something that most organizations struggle to do consistently. So next, as you all know, the gig economy is really starting to take off. So now in addition to a multi-generational workforce, you need to start worrying about temporary workers as well. Now traditionally, temporary workers were slotted under procurement and not HR, particularly from a sourcing point of view. but increasingly it will move to HR as organizations try to create that one unified talent pool and the experience around it. So this poses another challenge. Now you have to deal with multiple categories of workers, and even within temporary workers you have different categories such as statement of work, independent contractors, so on and so forth. So next challenge is really about payroll data. So we have all of this payroll data lying around. Are we using it well to make strategic decisions? Forget strategic decisions. Do we even know basic metrics such as, are our payroll departments running efficiently? Can we predict overtime today based on last year's trends? These are some of the simpler use cases, but you'd be surprised to know how many organizations struggle to even get a hold of basic inferences from their data. Finally, and this is perhaps a pet peeve of the analyst community, payroll today is too manual. If you speak to a technologist and describe the payroll problem to him or her, they'll likely say that it's just a bunch of calculations in a cross-net engine. It should be 70 to 100% automated, depending on who you ask. Now, at the same time, you ask a practitioner and they'll say that even approaching 50% automation is near impossible. So in my view, the actual answer may be somewhere in between, but it's clear that we can certainly do better and reduce the number of manual touch points that we have today. So ultimately, what does all of this mean? Today you hear a great deal of talk about employee experience and what organizations are doing to provide that experience. Now, payroll is something that every employee is affected by fundamentally. So to create that superlative employee experience, it's crucial to relook at payroll as well. So Cynthia, those are the major challenges in payroll from my vantage point. Over to you now.
Thanks, Anil. Thanks for highlighting some of the key challenges in payroll today. We heard how an analyst sees payroll challenges. Tamar, this is for you. As a leader in a global organization, what is your view on challenges in managing payroll? What are the internal and business challenges in managing payroll? Over to you, Tamar.
Hi, my name is Tamer Amr. I'm the Middle East Regional Head of HR for PORR Construction. It is a pleasure to be here with you today, share my experiences, and listen to all your comments and questions. And I'd like to start by first going into PORR, kind of lay the groundwork, understand what the business is like and where we're at in terms of the need for payroll solutions. PORR is an Austrian construction company. It's one of the largest Austrian construction companies and one of Europe's leading infrastructure specialities, with about 18,000 staff members and a production output of about 4.7 billion euros. Stable markets, Austria, Germany, Switzerland, Poland, Czech Republic, and project markets and other markets, including the Middle East. Since I'm located in the Middle East and I look over the Middle East projects, I can talk to you about some of the projects, monumental mega projects like the projects for the Qatar Rail, the rail projects in Qatar, including slab track and all that. Also, the Al Wakra Stadium, where we're actually building the Al Wakra Stadium for the Qatar Supreme Committee and various infrastructure projects. PORR builds itself on intelligent construction, connects people. We don't want to be among the biggest construction companies in Europe. We want to be among the best. Our motto in the way we do business is that intelligent construction connects people. Our goal is to bring together our high standards regarding quality, technology, efficiency, and with every person involved in the projects. So whether a builder or a user, it doesn't matter. After all, we build for the people. At PORR, we value trustworthiness, reliability, customer focus, teamwork, which are very pillars of the identity of the organization. So This slide shows you the sort of the backbone of how we think in PORR, and we think in terms of three things: innovation, which ideally it permeates obviously everything that we do. Every single PORRian is responsible for innovation. There are new ideas, creative concepts that make PORR fit for the future, and this is why we have established central contact points for PORR, technology management and innovation department. Innovation, again, is a central piece of the PORRian life. Digitalization. And PORR is right on track with the paperless construction sites. This is one of the things that we heavily promote in our conferences and day-to-day life, which is the digitalization that's become and how it has taken over our construction sites and the construction industry in general. So for many years, there have been working intensively on the topics of the future, including BIM, paperless construction sites, and that's the new world of construction. Third is the digital construction site, which is more or less at PORR. We don't think in 3 dimensions. We have recently introduced a 5D design system. The 4th dimension refers to time, and the 5th is the cost. So let's talk about the challenges that the HR payroll leader sees nowadays. We'll look at 7 points: demographic chaos, digital technology, data, regulatory compliance, decreased accuracy, employee experience, and labor intensiveness. So the demographic chaos and the workforce nowadays consists of younger and older generations and is a lot more diverse. 77 million millennials make up more than 50% of the workforce. What that means is that it's a very mobile workforce and freelance economy. They feel underutilized, and hence there is a very high turnover rate. They expect a level of reward and work experience that's defined by purpose and consistent learning curve. Digital technology. It is everywhere and there's no escape. At home, with your kids, at the grocery store, at work, with your HR system. Digital technology is definitely disrupting the environment. It is creating opportunities, but also challenges within the organizations. It is transforming all aspects of the company business, including payroll, among other things. Advances in digital technology are among the strong forces that are propelling the organizations to re-image the payroll operations. In fact, the accelerated rate of change is requiring companies to be more agile. Look at companies like Uber, Airbnb, and how they exemplify the business model of innovation to adapt the technology. Data. Identifying and accessing the data elements is always a struggle in legacy payroll systems. Data is typically spread throughout tables, screens, and multiple stakeholders, and it's just cumbersome. Finding the data elements is typically a challenge. So on the other hand, housing data in multiple systems is also an issue. Less ability to produce enhanced reports and data analytics and inability to access the data makes it one of the challenges that you also see as an HR payroll leader. Regulatory compliance. This one is specifically put there for international companies that work amongst different countries and so on and so forth. The constant changes in data collection and reporting and the challenge between the different regulatory compliance between different countries is definitely also one of the challenges. Decreased accuracy. And this one is simply stated the increased human interaction through manual entries and timesheets and Excel sheets puts a higher risk in terms of the human error, the manual corrections, and hence the decreased accuracy. My favorite, the employee experience. The full employee experience is definitely not explored. The employee is not engaged, and the process is a lot more cumbersome, and the information is not there. The labor intensiveness. The current legacy systems are very labor intensive, and the process is based on repeatability and extensive multi-steps. Hence, the operator is consistently facing data entry problems and processing errors. Over to you, Cynthia.
Thanks, Tamar. Thanks for sharing PORR's journey with our audience and your view on the payroll challenges. Let's move to the next section of the webinar, Reimagining Payroll. Over to you, Anil. What do we expect from payroll of the future?
Thank you, Cynthia. So now we should really be asking ourselves, what might the payroll of the future look like? What can we expect from it? Now you'll see certain questions on the slide, and if you think about it from a technology standpoint, the answer to all of these is of course it can be done. You can certainly have a single payroll system for both contingent and permanent workers. It can be automated near 100% in an ideal world, but even in the real world, we can certainly strive to achieve more and more end-to-end automation. On-demand payroll cycles, again, feasible from a technology point of view, and it has been feasible for some time. There are organizations who are experimenting with this currently. Think about how powerful this could be. An on-demand pay cycle would certainly change the life of a set of employees and make an organization more attractive to a certain set of candidates for sure. So we have whole business categories catering to the need of a mid-month cash flow situation with solutions like high interest loans and payday loans, etc. So having an anytime drawdown of salaries will certainly reduce the need of these kind of credit mechanisms. So overall, this kind of an on-demand payroll could certainly have a very positive impact on the lives of employees. So finally, why can't the data be used effectively? Break down those silos between contingent and permanent, between different geographies, different systems, and start using the data to make better, considered, data-driven strategic decisions. So as I said, all of this is feasible from a technology point of view today. Of course, there are practical barriers to it, but if we don't think about the art of the possible, we will never get to what is achievable. That's the whole idea behind painting the picture of the future, which we will do in the subsequent slides. So let's look at one illustration of what the future may look like. Consider a payroll system on a blockchain base with different kinds of automation and an overarching analytics layer. So let's take a step back and let me talk about blockchain for a bit. So in its essence, blockchain is a distributed ledger which is immutable. That is, the data once written cannot really be changed. The distributed nature also brings in data transparency to all participants on the blockchain. Data is stored as a series of blocks, and all participants can view this data in the basic configuration. Of course, there are ways and means to provide only necessary visibility to certain participants, but that's a topic which needs to be explored probably as a part of a different webinar. The final piece of the puzzle is the smart contracts. So the smart contracts on blockchain are pieces of code which reside there, and it can be used for automation. So now that we have this context, in the payroll scenario, we're considering one such blockchain based construct. We envision a system that runs payroll for both contingent and permanent workers. Now all the required data is stored on the blockchain as a series of blocks. Note that this doesn't require too much additional effort, so no one is saying that you need to replace your HCM system or your HRIS system with an entirely new blockchain based system. You can continue to use the same front end, just that the database would be part of the blockchain. Similarly, other information including work contracts, regulatory information, etc., all can be part of this blockchain. Again, either as a redundant database or even as a live database on the blockchain. So the gross to net engines would be constructed as smart contracts. Various robots are also participants on the blockchain, and finally you have an analytics engine which feeds off of all of the data that is part of the ledger. So that's what the model looks like. Now let's try and envision this in action. So visualizing a permanent employee payroll on this system is relatively simple. So I'm going to pick the case of a SOW worker. Now consider the case of Tom, an SOW worker, who should be paid only after his deliverable is approved first by Chris, who is his direct supervisor, and then Alicia, who is Chris's supervisor. Let's assume that Tom scans a document and puts it on the blockchain with the appropriate tag. Now this is Tom's deliverable. Now once this is put on the blockchain, this triggers a smart contract that notifies an AI enabled bot. Now the AI bot can convert the scanned document into a digital format using intelligent OCR and extract relevant data from the document using NLP. Then it can compare this data to the SOW contract to verify if the document meets the basic requirements which are set out. Once the basic verification is done, a trigger is raised to Chris for sign off. Next, Chris validates and sign off, adding another block to the blockchain, which in turn triggers a smart contract notifying Alicia. Alicia reviews and approves, adding another block. This final block triggers a payment process, calling a sequence of smart contracts that extract information from employment contracts and regulations, and finally runs the gross to net calculation. Once the net amount is determined, payment is made in the form of tokens to the bank, which is also a participant on the blockchain. Now, the tokens that the bank receive in and of itself have no value outside of the blockchain ecosystem, particularly if it's not a widely accepted one like Bitcoin. So the bank converts the token to fiat currency and deposits it in Tom's account, and finally he gets paid. In between, the government is also notified of tax related information, and of course, blockchain being an immutable database, all that information is permanently available. Finally, now all this data is sitting on the blockchain, and as a result, analytics becomes relatively simpler since the data is no longer siloed. Of course, there still may be need of converting it into the appropriate form and cleansing the data, but certainly the starting point is much easier. Now, as you can see, this is a system that is more or less automated, allows near instant drawdown of salaries, combines contingent and permanent workforce, and allows for better analytics, which is what we set out to achieve as we started this section. So technically, again, all of this is feasible, but let me follow this up with a caveat that this particular system is not easy to implement, given that it's an ecosystem which is required and there are multiple players, but certainly it's possible even today. Now, organizations need not go all out and look to get a radically new system in place, the kind that I just described. But what is imperative is that they keep an eye on these new digital technologies and make at least incremental progress with taking payroll to the next level. So various technologies are, of course, at various stages of maturity. While cloud and system-based automation, you could argue it's already played out, technologies such as RPA and advanced analytics are only starting to get big. Right? Less mature technologies like AI and blockchain may have tremendous impact, but only if they live up to their potential. So organizations should start placing calculated bets on these newer technologies and seek use cases that make most sense for them. So for instance, advanced analytics can be used to predict absence or overtime pay, among a host of other uses. Automation, particularly RPA, can be used for a variety of things, including system transfers, reconciliation, validation, so on and so forth. Artificial intelligence is, of course, touted to be the next big thing. Now, there are many areas to which it can be applied, but given the maturity of the technology currently, we primarily see application in the form of NLP-enabled chatbots. Finally, blockchain. Blockchain has the potential to change the way we transact fundamentally. However, one must keep in mind that this is an ecosystem play, and hence there may be difficulties in implementing it and getting all concerned parties onto a shared platform. So as of now, we can think of applications in multi-country payroll, particularly in a aggregator scenario, or international payments. Again, other use cases from the HR world include background verification, identity management, so on and so forth. Of course, other use cases would emerge as time passes as well. So Cynthia, that's my take on envisioning the future and taking out of it what is relevant for each organization. Over to you.
Thanks, Anil. Thanks for sharing detailed and insightful use cases on the future tech. I'm sure the audience would have found it useful. Tamar, we now understand how PORR as a global organization is keen on employee engagement and experience. What are the key steps you have taken in addressing the challenges you had earlier mentioned? Over to you, Tamar.
Thank you, Priti. It's and Anil, it's a very enlightening presentation. The technology is definitely, as I mentioned earlier, is moving at a very rapid speed, and it's inevitable that organizations, HR organizations, have to catch up with it and embrace all the changes that are happening. At PORR, what we decided to do, we've made a very enlightening choice, and we went with Ramco for HR solution, which has also mainly addressed our payroll challenges that we've talked about earlier. With Ramco, what we've gained speed. We've gained simplification of the process, gained efficiency, transparency, employee experience, and adopting and embracing the technology. With the speed, we simply stated the payroll processing is certainly taking less time. It's simplified. It's quite a bit easier to run the payroll and to process it in let's say a less cumbersome approach. Efficiency, conflicts are flagged before time, and processing, like I said, is less cumbersome. Transparency, with the information being accessible and tracked to all stakeholders. The employee experience itself is that is 180 degree change. It's a complete, full-on 180% increase in the improvement in the employee experience, being it more efficient, less complicated, more transparent, and the employee itself is more engaged, especially when we start talking about the adaptation of the technology, the high-end technology, the AI, the chatbots, the applications that are other applications that are provided by Ramco that have definitely given us an edge and given the employee a full 3D experience, which would again that it immediately translates into PORR being a more competitive company in terms of attracting talent and increasing the employee retention rate. At some point, companies are going to be competing on in terms of price. So in terms of a package for an employee, in these competitive market, the difference is not that much. We're not, if you're competing, let's say for in the international market, the difference in the packages are really not that much. What makes a difference is how the employee views the company culture and the employee experience itself within the company, which solutions like Ramco gives us that extra edge. I want to go into a couple of just examples. Like let's talk about the hubs with Ramco. So before you've got multiple stopovers, and now you've got all this, all the dashboard showing you, the hub showing you everything in one screen. Let's say you're traveling from Qatar to the US or India, and I chose Qatar because I live in Qatar right now, but you can travel between any two countries, and you'd prefer having a direct flight rather than a multi-transit. That makes sense. All of us prefer comfort and instant access to information and data. Let's face it, this is the world we live in. Now, this is what Ramco has brought to us with this technology. It allows the CHRO and the finance leaders to access what they want through one screen. There are several hubs that we use, like the payroll hub, which allows someone like myself to see all the critical elements of regarding payroll on one screen. The time and attendance hub summarizes the key elements, and I can go through many examples of the sort. Next screen, please. This, in my eyes, the chatbots, is one of the more phenomenal experiences that the employee has had, and our employees have had, and based on also feedbacks that I've received from employees. So you can, I'm sure you've all dealt with chatbots before. It's sort of like your own personal assistant, your own personal, WhatsApp. Basically, it gives the employee the ability to receive information and react to information, and submit transactions immediately on the go. And again, you notice that the secret here of everything that we're discussing is the timeline. We want everything to be done, and we want it to be done now. That's how the employee wants it done. This is the new age, and this is what we get with something like this, the chatbots and the other solutions coming from Ramco. Making our employees more comfortable at work, as I mentioned, is critical in order to ensure the happy workforce. Given the advancement in technology and the agile workforce, we're matching up to their expectations. When we talked with Ramco about the chatbots, it provides us a solution for our employee transactions. The simplest transaction, whether it's you're checking the employees checking their payslip, checking on their team members. They want to see their team members, or put in for a leave. They want to know what the leave balance is. They put in for they want to apply for a leave. It's simply done with a few clicks. And again, let's face it, I'm sure they're typing messages on WhatsApp or whatnot, so they're very used to using their thumbs and then the screens, and just asking for where's my payslip, or what's my payslip, and for February, or what's my I want to apply for a leave. It makes it's a very comfortable platform. It's very comfortable medium for them. So what happens is this saves them time and gives the employee an experience in chatting just like how they do it in social media. Let's talk about task automation. The screen that you are currently seeing, I'm sorry, can we see the next slide, please? So the screen that you're currently seeing is the payroll configuration screen of Ramco. This allows my payroll head to configure direct mail alerts to the employees from the system. How cool is that? Say you have a payroll expectations, and you want clear all that before the processing of your payroll. All you have to do is just identify them from the screen. So this automatically shows the list of warning and errors, and not to forget reporting them. I can keep going and going on this subject, but in the interest of time, I'll turn it over to other speakers. Over to you, Cynthia.
Thanks, Tamar. Thanks for the kind words about Ramco. We're glad to hear your experience and feedback. Bala, we heard from our lead analyst and HR leader. Can you elaborate on what's coming up from a tech provider perspective? What's in the pipeline of future tech for Ramco?
Thanks, Cynthia. Uh, See, the goal of a payroll department remains same all these years. I'm sure you would all agree it is to get a perfect payslip and a pay register. Well, probably just the types of payslips change. 20 years back, it was a dot matrix printer with a pre-printed stationery, and maybe from there we moved on to laser-based free-form printouts, and recently to online e-payslips. And this is how probably the change happened. But the goal of payroll is absolutely the same, which is perfect payslip and perfect pay register. As we move on, while accuracy remains as a goal, the trend in payroll system changes are mainly to do with usability, especially when an employee starts asking the why question. Why should I log in, browse, search, and do so many things to get a payslip? Why so much data entry I should repeat every time after my travel to claim my expenses? Why can't there be easier and smarter ways? Can't there be a day with less data entry for me? Entering leaves, timesheets, compass, oh, so much. So this is where the employees are starting asking this why question. Expectation is to simplify everything. And we saw some of those simplifications of a payroll system already experienced by PORR users. Tamar was explaining us. At Ramco, the simplification journey started from ESS and then moved to bots, and now marching fast with voice assistants, be it Google Assistant or Alexa, added with the strength of artificial intelligence. We spoke about the employees. Let's imagine a payroll admin and a financial controller asking the same why questions. A payroll administrator asking, why should I do a tedious job of manually validating checklist after checklist to detect data errors? Why should I sit in front of the system processing payroll and watching the progress bar move? Similarly, a financial controller asking, why should I struggle every month to decide how much money to keep in different banks for employee payouts? Why should I wait till the last minute of every month payout date? Can't I be given an early indication? Can't there be something intelligent here? And Anil talked about in the previous slide an interesting scenario. Why should we even have fixed payout periods? If system can validate a work completion and pay on work completion basis, your monthly periods, the variances, the reconciliations, all of them goes away. Just pay what is due to the employee systematically, right, and forget about it. Well, are we imagining too much? Not really. Someone said, when sound is stretched, it becomes music. And so is technology. When you stretch it a bit, it gives you wonderful solutions. And this is where reimagining payroll becomes a necessity with the new technological feasibilities available, through which we can definitely answer the why questions of the payroll administrators, financial controllers, and the management too, where we can reach a stage where system would understand the context and anticipate the needs of the users and serve them better. It is said that in 2 years from now, we would be having more conversation with voice assistants than humans. Beyond being scary, it also helps to augment our productivity in a day-to-day life. And why not leverage that at work as well? Yes, we can get interactive payslips. Forget about e-payslips. It can be interactive. You can ask, why is the salary increase? What is the difference between last month and this month? How much percentage it is increased and whatnot? You can practically talk to your voice assistant and have an interactive payslip. Not only that, we can have proactive personal assistance too. Imagine John, an employee, getting his voice assistant informing him that just before the payroll day that your net pay for the month could be less by $500, as I don't see you are swiping for 2 days, and asking him what to do about that. And John guiding the voice assistant to say, go ahead and apply my comp for those 2 days which I missed. And similarly, if you are a payroll administrator or a payroll operations person, assuming when you start the car from home and start chatting with your voice assistant, who reports to you on what inputs pending for this month payroll, and you commanding your assistant to do the follow-ups with people and do the authorizations automatically, and once done, it even runs the payroll and sends you register. All this happens by the time you reach your office. Interesting, isn't it? Definitely, you don't need to sit in front of the machine and watch the progress bar move in a payroll system anymore. And the artificial intelligence can give insights to the executives too. For sure, the group CFO would get to know that last month payout is $150K, and say with 5 more new joiners and 3 leavers, and this being a bonus pay month, of course, the system artificial intelligence can work out and tell you may probably need $250K in your bank account for your payouts for all your employees well ahead of the pay date. Actually, going by the trend, no, you seem to be spending that. You can even have suggestions from the system automatically where it can say you seem to be spending 30% every month on overtime, and you need to replan your headcount to increase, say, your headcounts by 17 FTEs, which would make better cost sense for you instead of paying overtime less with lesser headcounts. This is something definitely possible, and Anil did speak about this in the earlier slide. Right. Yes, here are some samples of how a voice assistant can speak and guide an employee or an administrator. We will skip this. We'll just go to the next interesting portion, the facial recognition. It is definitely a step forward, not only to give frictionless, flawless attendance capture, it can even do more. It can monitor whether an associate is spending sufficient time on call in the BPO function at his desk or not. It can even evaluate if the billing person at a McDonald's is at the desk serving the customers or busy watching his WhatsApp. Definitely, technology has more answers than what we can imagine. It's just a need for the payroll administrators and the people in the payroll domain to reimagine the way they can use this technology. Over to you, Cynthia.
Thanks, Bala. That was quite a detailed presentation on what's cooking in payroll. Let me reiterate to the audience that you can type in your questions on the chat window and we will ensure to answer the same during the last 15 minutes Q&A session of the webinar. Let's move on to sharing the best practices for enterprises. Anil, over to you.
Thank you, Cynthia. So as with any transformative effort, there are certain practices that one should keep in mind while embarking on this path. So some of these may seem obvious, but it's stunning how many organizations get these wrong. First, ensure all relevant stakeholders are involved. For instance, in the case of RPA, operations may be the first adopters, but as soon as it gets big, IT gets into play as well. And so as soon as there's some scale, you have security concerns, you have infrastructure concerns, and the IT team gets involved. So ensuring that there's early alignment between these two and a clear division of responsibilities really helps smooth out these kind of challenges later. Second, the talent model will change. Now, this is not the fear mongering that you read in most papers, but a toned down version. As we go more digital, reliance on humans for transactional tasks decrease. This may not take the shape of job losses, but maybe you would hire less folks for transactional jobs. Also, the nature of existing jobs will change from transactional to more judgment oriented. So some amount of reskilling and upskilling of the existing workforce is expected. So you need to be prepared for this kind of change and the associated change management. Next, ensure that you have the ecosystem to understand and interpret analytics results. It's all well and good to have a million reports and 1,000 dashboards, but it's a complete waste of time and money if you don't have the right support to make sense of these results and to interpret these results. Now, whether the support is internal or external, it's really up to the organization, but you need to ensure you have some form of support in place. Next, when adopting digital, there are various approaches that one can take. Now, you may want to go all out and do a big bang transformation, particularly if you're a progressive, risk-taking organization which is very comfortable with technology. But for most organizations, we have found that a spiral approach works the best. So this is where you secure a small seed budget, start to show some results, then secure further buy-in and bigger budgets, and so on and so forth. So this is an approach which is relatively lower risk, but at least you start getting incremental results. So next, keep an eye out for next generation technologies. Now, it's unrealistic to expect everyone to become the experts in deep learning or machine learning techniques, but ensure that you at least keep on top of the latest development as it relates to your world and allied areas. So for example, if you're in payroll, it may also be worthwhile to keep an eye on finance and accounting. There may be other technologies on the horizon as well. So try to stay abreast of some of these, at least some of the more promising or revolutionary ones. Of course, there are analysts like me whose full-time job it is to track these kind of changes which are happening. So one way of keeping on top of these changes is to stay connected to the analyst or the research community as well. Last, if you decide to go for a service provider or a technology vendor, make sure that you ask the right questions, not only about the current maturity of their offerings, but also their future readiness. So are they able to demonstrate capabilities to deliver next generation technologies? How innovative are they? What do they have in their product roadmap? All of these are questions you need to ask in addition to run-of-the-mill evaluation questions. So net, if you follow all of these practices, you should be in a good position as you seek to embark on this transformation journey. Over to you, Cynthia.
Thanks, Anil. Bala, do you have any thoughts on best practices, please?
Sure, Cynthia. All this while we saw about challenges in usability and making things smoother from a single entity payroll perspective. We saw some good answers in the form of zero UI, voice assistant, artificial intelligence, and extra. But let me give you a glimpse of how multi-country global payroll works, given our experience with large MNCs and Fortune 500s. If you have an organization spread across 40 different countries, I am sure you are familiar with some of these challenges that I'm going to talk about. Managing multi-country statutory puzzles and local requirements, and that too with multiple softwares, interfaces, touch points. It is a challenge indeed. Most of the companies claim they have common rules and policies. But when you start the transformation, you realize there are leakages everywhere. Multiple vendors served them multiple ways all these days that you get to know only when you are doing a transformation. There are exceptions in every rule and policy in each of those participating countries. And the dilemma between having centralized controls and localized flexibilities. This is another key factor in the global company scenario. And finally, the ability to bring all stakeholders together and drive the transformation. This is the biggest challenge. By making right, experienced decisions during the execution is very key. And many global projects fail because of this one aspect. See, if you have 10 payroll products across 40 countries, as I said earlier, obviously it would have challenges. Having a single platform is the best start if you are looking to manage a global payroll seamlessly and smoothly, because as many touch points are there with different products, as many chances are there that there could be leakages and troubles. So a single platform is an ideal start. Having the support of payroll bureaus across countries to help taking decisions on statutories, it's a good thing to do, because statutories keep changing and evolving, countries keep changing their regulations. So payroll bureaus do help a lot. And the way you organize your workshops across the countries during the transformation is a key thing. If systematic scenario-based workshops are conducted, the probability of getting all requirements covered early in the game is more. Beyond all, experienced SME guidance in the transformation journey is a must, and payroll advisory services play a key role in this context. I certainly believe having many tools and technologies with us A good payroll advisory service can do wonders for a global transformation. Well, I believe more than us as technology provider, Tamar may have some more thoughts on the same from a global user point of view. Tamar, over to you.
Thank you very much for the insightful presentation. I'm gonna in this section of what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stick to the basics. I'm gonna take us, back a couple of steps and just talk about the basic what I see are the basic best practices in terms of an HR payroll leader. 4 steps: set up policies and manage expectations, clear accountability, continuous audits, and technology utilization. In terms of setting up policies and managing expectation, we all have the same objective. We want an effective payroll department that produces efficient, accurate data. The question is, how do we get there? That road to the solution depends on your industry, organization, your company culture, your geographical location. So some organizations might have more stricter policies. Others may have, the policies may be more flexible. Either way, the idea is to make sure that all the stakeholders know what is expected out of the payroll department and what's expected out of them. When to submit the timesheet, who approves it, when do they approve it, who's notified, if the employee goes on leave. Answers to all these specific questions are part of the education process, the communication process, and the transparency. Clear accountability. It sort of touches on the subject from the policy subject, but also establishing the policies and the expectations so that all stakeholders need to be accountable, know what the role is. Everyone needs to know their part. Responsibility lines have to be very clear. The risk of not taking responsibility of your part needs to be addressed. Employees need to know what they are responsible for doing. The managers, likewise. The next part is the continuous audits, and it's all about accuracies, right? So this addresses the accuracy part. Simply stated, you're dealing with financial numbers and money, right? And I'm sure we all like to receive the right amount of money when we're supposed to receive it. So the need for accuracy is quadrupled here. You need to minimize the risk of errors, which will somewhat reduce the risk of the off-cycle payments. And so it's a continuous cycle of audits. Technology utilization, and I think we all can appreciate this part, which is what we've been discussing. It's basically more or less embracing the technology and not standing there and watching the train go by. Payroll is the most intensive part of the HR, and it has led a lot of organizations to invest in the HR technology solutions that would automate the mundane payroll tasks. Let's face it, the individual tasks are very tedious and mundane and repetitive. Why not embrace the technology and use a system that would make your life easier? The technology solution, it's process driven, and it can set up layers of tasks in certain order and trigger actions for stakeholders involved in the process, leading to a very smooth end product, making you working less and the employee happier. Over to you, Cynthia.
Thank you, Tamar. Thank you, Anil, Bala. Thank you so much. That was an insightful conversation. Given the time, let's quickly move on to the Q&A session. We've been receiving a lot of questions. We will try to answer most of them during the webinar, whilst we will ensure to connect with you by email or social media and answer the rest.